He stood up at my own wedding in front of 200 guests and told everyone I was never good enough for him. Then he laughed, and they laughed with him. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I did not cry that night. Not once. I smiled so hard my cheeks ached, and I kept smiling until the last guest left, until the lights went out, until I was alone in a hotel bathroom with my wedding dress still on, staring at a stranger in the mirror who used to be me. My name is Naomi Reyes. I was 31 years old on the day I married Daniel Cross, and I thought foolishly, desperately, that I had finally found the one thing my whole life had been missing: a partner, someone who saw me. I was wrong, but I didn't know how wrong yet, not until he opened his mouth in front of everyone I loved. Let me take you back, not to the wedding, not yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I gave up to get to that altar, so you understand exactly what it cost me when it all came crashing down. I met Daniel 4 years earlier, at a friend's dinner party I almost didn't go to. I was tired that night. Work had drained me. I was a project manager at a logistics firm, the kind of job that eats your evenings and gives nothing back but a paycheck. My friend Priya had begged me to come, said there'd be someone she wanted me to meet. I remember rolling my eyes at her over the phone. I'm not in the mood to be set up, I told her. She laughed and said, just come eat the food then. No pressure. There was pressure. There's always pressure. Daniel was charming in the way that made you forget to ask questions. Tall, easy smile, the kind of voice that made you lean in a little closer just to catch every word. He complimented my earrings before he even asked my name. He listened, actually listened, when I talked about my job, my family, the little dog I'd had growing up that died when I was 14, and that I still, embarrassingly, teared up about sometimes. You're different, he told me that night, walking me to my car. Most people talk at me, you talk with me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because anything happened, nothing did, but because I lay awake replaying his voice in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. 2 years of dinners, of weekend trips, of him meeting my mother and making her laugh so hard she cried, of him telling me, quietly in the dark, when he thought I was already asleep, that he'd never felt this safe with anyone. I should tell you now because it matters later. My mother never fully trusted him. She never said it outright, not until much later, but I'd catch her watching him sometimes, this small crease between her eyebrows, like she was trying to solve a puzzle nobody else could see. He's charming, she told me once over coffee, choosing her words like she was walking across ice. Charming men know exactly what they're doing, Naomi. That's what makes them charming. I laughed it off. I told her she was being overprotective, that not every man who smiled easily was hiding something. I believed that. I needed to believe that. The proposal happened on a beach at sunset. Cliched, I know, but I cried anyway, big ugly tears, because for the first time in my adult life I felt chosen. Truly chosen. Not settled for, not a backup plan. Chosen. Planning the wedding took a year. Daniel wasn't hands-on with details. He left the flowers, the venue, the guest list negotiations to me, but he was hands-on with money. Generous, even. He insisted on covering more than half the cost himself, which surprised me because Daniel wasn't what you'd call wealthy. He worked in sales, commission-based, unpredictable income. But he kept saying, "This is our day, Naomi. I want it to be perfect for you." Looking back now, I wonder how much of that generosity was really about me at all. There were small things, in those final months before the wedding, that I noticed and then talked myself out of noticing. The way he'd go quiet sometimes when my career came up, especially after I got promoted to senior project manager, a promotion that came with a raise larger than his entire annual bonus. The way he introduced me to his coworkers once as my fiancé, she does something with spreadsheets, and laughed like it was a joke, and I laughed too, because what else do you do when the man you love shrinks you down in front of strangers? I told myself it was nerves, pre-wedding stress. Everyone gets weird before a wedding, right? His mother, Linda, never liked me either, not that she hid it well. At one dinner, she looked at me over her wine glass and said, "Daniel's used to being the smart one in the room. Must be an adjustment for him, being with someone so driven." I smiled at that too. God, I smiled at so many things I should have questioned. The morning of the wedding, I remember standing in front of the mirror in my childhood bedroom, my mother fixing the last pin in my hair, and she looked at my reflection instead of me directly and said, so quietly I almost missed it, "You can still change your mind, baby, right up until you say the words." "Mom," I laughed, but it came out shaky. "It's my wedding day." "I know," she said. "That's exactly why I'm saying it now." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. I thought she was just being her usual cautious self, the woman who checked locks twice and read every contract line by line. I kissed her cheek and told her I loved her and that everything was going to be beautiful. And it was beautiful. God, it was beautiful. The venue was an old restored barn wrapped in string lights, string quartet playing as I walked down the aisle, 200 guests standing, phones raised, my father's hand trembling in mine because he was trying not to cry. Daniel stood at the altar in his charcoal suit, and when he saw me, his face did something I'd never seen before, something unreadable. I told myself it was emotion. I told myself it was awe. The ceremony went perfectly. Vows exchanged, rings placed, a kiss that made the whole barn erupt into applause. For a few hours, I was the happiest woman alive. I danced with my father. I laughed until my stomach hurt with my bridesmaids. I watched Daniel work the room, charming as ever, refilling glasses, patting backs, and I thought, this is my life now. This man is my life now. Then came the toasts. His best man went first, sweet, forgettable, the usual jokes about Daniel's terrible taste in fantasy football teams. Then my father spoke, and he cried through half of it, and I cried with him. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stood, tapped his glass with a fork, waited for the room to quiet. He looked so composed, so sure of himself. I remember feeling a swell of love watching him, thinking, this is the man who's going to stand up and tell everyone how lucky he is. He didn't. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he started, easy, smiling, working the crowd like he always did. "And I want to say something about Naomi, something real since we're all family here tonight." I remember smiling up at him, glass in hand, heart full. "Naomi's a planner," he said, and people chuckled because everyone knew that about me. "She plans everything down to the minute, and I used to think that was cute." He paused, let the silence stretch just a beat too long. "But honestly, some nights I wonder if she scheduled loving me too, because it never really felt spontaneous. It felt like a task she checked off her list." Laughter. Nervous, scattered laughter, the kind people give when they don't know if it's a joke. I sat frozen, my smile cracking at the edges, waiting for the punchline that would make it okay. "I mean, look at her," he continued, gesturing toward me with his glass, and something in his tone had shifted, something colder underneath the charm. "Beautiful dress, beautiful venue, everything perfect, because Naomi doesn't know how to do anything less than perfect. Doesn't know how to just be, doesn't know how to be enough without proving something." The room had gone quiet in that uncomfortable way, laughter dying in throats, guests glancing at each other, unsure whether to smile or look away. "Honestly," he said, and now he was looking directly at me and his eyes weren't warm anymore. "I used to wonder what a woman like her was even doing with a guy like me. Then I realized she needed someone. Someone who'd actually stay. Because let's be real, folks." And here he laughed, that easy, charming laugh he used on everyone, except now it felt like a blade. "Naomi's the kind of woman men leave. I just decided to be the one who didn't." The silence after that was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed, a short, startled, uncomfortable laugh, quickly swallowed. And then, horrifyingly, a few others followed, that nervous ripple of laughter people give when they don't know what else to do with their own shock. And I sat there in my wedding dress, champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips, watching my husband smile at a room full of people who were laughing at the woman he'd just humiliated. My mother's chair scraped back, so hard it nearly tipped. And that was the exact moment, glass in my trembling hand, mascara threatening to spill, 200 faces turned toward me, that I saw my father stand up too, slow and deliberate, his jaw tight in a way I had never once seen in 31 years of being his daughter. "Sit down, Daniel," he said, quiet, but it cut through that barn like a gunshot. Daniel blinked, still smiling, like he hadn't quite processed that the joke had died in the room. "Dad, it's fine," I started, my voice cracking. "No," my father said, not looking at me, eyes locked on my new husband. "It is not fine, and I think it's time everyone here learned exactly who they just watched Naomi marry." He didn't sit down. That's the part I remember most vividly, not the words that came next, but the fact that my father, a man who avoided conflict his entire life, who let arguments go just to keep the peace, stood there in that barn with 200 people staring, and did not sit down. Daniel's smile finally faltered, just slightly, just enough that I saw it. "Robert," he said, forcing a laugh, "come on, it was a joke." "It wasn't a joke," my father said, and I think everyone in this room felt that. I sat frozen, the champagne glass trembling in my hand, watching my father, quiet, gentle Robert Rays, who cried at every wedding he'd ever attended, who once apologized to a waiter for sending back cold soup, become someone I barely recognized. Steel where I'd only ever seen softness. "You want to talk about who plans everything," my father continued, and now he turned slowly to face the room. "Let me tell you something Naomi doesn't know I know. Something I found out 3 weeks ago, and I've been sitting on it, hoping, praying that I was wrong, that I'd misunderstood, that there was some explanation that made sense." My stomach dropped. I felt Priya's hand find mine under the table, gripping hard. "Dad," I whispered, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. "3 weeks ago," my father said, "I got a call from a man named Marcus Webb. Said he needed to speak with me urgently about my daughter's upcoming wedding. Said his name wouldn't mean anything to me. He was right. It didn't. Not until he told me he'd been engaged to Daniel 2 years ago, before Naomi, before any of us." The room had gone so still. I could hear the string lights humming faintly overhead. "Marcus told me," my father continued, voice steady, though I could see his hands shaking now, just slightly, "that Daniel left him 3 weeks before their wedding. Took the joint savings they'd built for their future together, nearly $40,000, and disappeared. Marcus didn't even know Daniel was engaged again until he saw the engagement announcement online. Recognized the ring. Said it was the same one he'd helped Daniel pick out for him." I felt the air leave my lungs. My ring. My beautiful ring, the one Daniel had teared up over when he slid it onto my finger on that beach at sunset, recycled. Reused. A prop. "I didn't want to believe him," my father said, and now his voice cracked, just barely, just once. "I wanted to protect my daughter's happiness so badly that I almost didn't tell her. I told myself, maybe this Marcus is lying, maybe he's bitter, maybe there's an explanation. So I did what any father would do. I looked into it myself." He reached into his jacket pocket, and later I would learn he'd been carrying folded papers in there all evening, through the ceremony, through the dinner, through my first dance, and pulled out several sheets, worn soft at the folds from handling. "Bank records," he said. "Marcus gave them to me. 3 different accounts, 3 different women going back 6 years. Alina Vasquez, Sarah Kim, now Marcus Webb, all engaged to Daniel. All left within a month of the wedding date, each time after considerable amounts of shared money mysteriously moved into accounts under Daniel's name alone." I stared at Daniel. Really stared at him, searching his face for the man I thought I knew, for some flicker of confusion, some proof this was a horrible misunderstanding. I found nothing, just a stillness, a calculation happening behind his eyes, like he was already working out his next move. "That's not," Daniel started, and his voice had lost all its charm now, gone thin and defensive. "Robert, that's ancient history, that has nothing to do with." "Then why," my father said, and his voice rose now, filling the barn, "did you insist on paying for more than half this wedding, Daniel? A man on a sales commission, no savings we've ever seen evidence of. Where did that money come from? Because it sure as hell didn't come from your last 3 paychecks." Nobody laughed now. Nobody made a sound. I turned to look at Daniel's mother, Linda, sitting at the family table, and I watched the color drain from her face, watched her realize in real time in front of everyone that her son's secrets were about to become public record. "Naomi," my father said, finally turning to me, and his eyes were wet now. "I am so sorry. I should have told you the second I found out, but I kept thinking she looks so happy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an explanation. I let my hope for you cloud my judgment, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." I don't remember standing up. I remember being upright. Suddenly, my chair knocked back, the room tilting slightly around me like the floor had shifted. "Is it true?" I asked Daniel. My voice came out steadier than I expected, steadier than I felt. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him 4 years ago, I watched him try to find words and fail. Actually fail. The charm that had gotten him through every uncomfortable moment of his life simply wasn't there. "Naomi, let me explain." "Is it true," I said again, louder this time, "that you have done this before, that there were other people, other weddings you walked away from with their money?" The silence stretched so long I thought he might actually deny it, might actually look 200 people in the eye and lie. Instead, he said quietly, "It's complicated." That was it. That was his answer. 200 guests, my new husband of 6 hours, and the best he could offer was "it's complicated." Something in me went very calm then. Not numb, I want to be clear about that, because numbness comes later. Numbness comes in the weeks after, when the shock wears thin and the grief moves in to take its place. This wasn't numbness. This was clarity, sharp and sudden, like waking up from a fog I hadn't realized I'd been standing in for 4 years. I took off my ring. I remember Priya gasping softly beside me. I remember my mother's hand pressed against her mouth. I remember the metal feeling strange against my fingers as I worked it loose. This ring that had felt like a promise for the past year, that now felt like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was part of. I set it down on the table, next to my untouched wedding cake, and I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, for what I understood, with total certainty, would be the last time I ever looked at him as my husband. "You stood up," I said, "in front of everyone who loves me, and you tried to make me small. You tried to make them laugh at me so nobody would ask questions about you. That's what this was, wasn't it? That whole toast. Cruelty as a distraction." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could see it in his face, the recognition that I'd understood something about him faster than he wanted me to. "I built a whole year around making you happy," I said, and my voice finally broke just slightly on the word happy. "I picked flowers you'd like. I invited people you wanted invited. I let my mother's warnings slide because I trusted you more than I trusted her instincts. And you stood up here, on the one night I asked for nothing but kindness, and you humiliated me for entertainment. Because it's easier to laugh at someone than to explain why you're a thief." Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping. Just one person at first. I found out later it was Priya's husband. And then, slowly, hesitantly, more joined, until the barn was filled with this strange, aching applause, not celebratory, but something closer to solidarity. People honoring the fact that I hadn't crumbled, that I'd stood in the wreckage of my own wedding and found my voice instead of losing it. Daniel looked around the room, at his mother, frozen and pale, at my father, standing tall despite the tears now running freely down his face, at 200 guests who had come to celebrate a marriage and were instead witnessing its ending. And I watched him understand, finally, that there was no charm left that could fix this. No smile wide enough. No joke smooth enough. He left, just walked out, through the barn doors, into the dark, and nobody stopped him. Nobody chased after him. The silence he left behind was almost peaceful by comparison. I want to tell you the rest healed quickly, that I found some triumphant closure by the end of that night. It didn't work that way. Grief doesn't care about timelines, even when the person you're grieving turned out to be exactly the kind of man your mother tried to warn you about. But here is what I know now, 3 years later, sitting in a home I bought myself, in a life I rebuilt one steady month at a time. I know that the annulment went through quickly once Marcus, Alina, and Sarah all came forward. Once his pattern became undeniable, once the district attorney's office in his home state got involved for fraud. I know that Daniel is currently serving time for what prosecutors called a sustained pattern of financial deception targeting romantic partners. I know that Marcus, Webb, and I are friends now. Strange as that sounds, bonded by a shared understanding of what it feels like to almost lose yourself to someone who never existed the way you believed. And I know that my father, who stood up that night with shaking hands and a breaking heart, taught me something I'll carry for the rest of my life. That real love sometimes looks like disrupting someone's happiness, if that happiness is built on a lie. That protecting someone isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it happens in front of 200 people, at the worst possible moment, because the alternative, silence, comfort, letting the lie continue, would have cost so much more. I didn't marry that year. I didn't marry the year after either. But I learned to trust my own instincts again, slowly, the way you learn to walk after an injury, carefully, deliberately, testing the ground before you put your full weight down. The dress still hangs in the back of my closet. I haven't been able to give it away, not yet. Not because I miss him, I don't, not for one single second, but because it reminds me of the night I stopped being someone's punchline and became, instead, the author of my own story. And if there's one thing I'd want anyone listening to this to understand, it's simply this. Sometimes the people who love us see the truth long before we're ready to. And sometimes, the bravest thing anyone can do for you is refuse to stay quiet, even when speaking up costs everyone in the room their comfort, their laughter, their carefully constructed evening. Even when it costs everything,